電車で GO!
Densha to Go on the Game Boy Color was released on December 10th, 1999, one day after Densha to Go Professional Spec on the PlayStation and 2 years after the original Densha to Go PlayStation port. You almost have to wonder why. Not that there's anything massively wrong with the game, it's just so out of place in the Dengo timeline. And we are 3 short months away from the launch of the third arcade entry in the series, Densha to Go 3 Commuter Edition. The original Game Boy had launched 11 years prior and, feeling the threat of Bandai's WonderSwan, Nintendo needed something to stay ahead of the competition as the 90s began to wind down. While the Game Boy had been a global mega success, the lack of colour and ancient processor were looking antediluvian in the age of PlayStation and the N64. It had endured long past anyone at Nintendo's expectations, but something needed to be done until a true successor was released. Recalling a promise made in the early days of the Game Boy, Nintendo went back to the drawing board and designed something new.
Escape to a world of color for each and every Game Boy game.
Imaginatively titled Game Boy Color, it was exactly that. Another low-powered handheld, slightly smaller with a 160x144 screen that uses cartridges, but with the added feature of having up to 52 colours on screen at once. Hardware similarities to the original Game Boy allowed the Game Boy Color to be backwards compatible with games and accessories. Still no screen lighting built into the console, once again necessitating a worm light. In the early days of the Game Boy Color, games that were playable on both the original Game Boy and Game Boy Color were released. These cartridges were solid black to differentiate them from the grey cards of the DMG Game Boy. Cards that ran exclusively on the Game Boy Color were usually semi-opaque, as was very much in fashion at the time. See-through tech was very in the late 90s, with all sorts of consumer tech having their internals exposed. A handful of colours were available at launch, including the astounding Atomic Purple. In fact, there were more colours available than games to play on it. 3 top-tier launch titles were available: Wario Land 2, Tetris DX, and the incredible Pocket Bomberman. Not messing, I think it's an absolute belter. No pack-in titles this time round. Nintendo had learnt their lesson, so they took a gamble on Tetris DX being as popular as the original, and made everyone pay for it. During its lifetime, it would receive a colorized version of Zelda: Link's Awakening, a port of NES game Super Mario Bros., a companion game to Rare's Perfect Dark, an unreasonably good Metal Gear Solid game, 2 Densha to Go games, and the jewels in its crown, 3 new and exclusive Pokemon games. The Game Boy Color never felt like a real successor to the Game Boy, and we all felt that this was just something temporary. Even at the time of the Game Boy Color's release, games magazines were already talking of rumours from Japan of a 16-bit portable SNES that was to be the real next big thing from Nintendo. Not that these rumours had any effect on sales. From its launch in 1998 to the release of the Game Boy Advance in 2001, the Game Boy Color was incredibly successful, selling millions of units and keeping collections going with its backwards compatibility. All of which leads us to the focus of this video, Densha to Go on the Game Boy Color. This is our second game from publisher CyberFront, following on from Densha to Go 2 on the Bandai WonderSwan. More details on CyberFront can be found in that video, link in the comments. So, a year into the Game Boy Color's lifespan and this game arrives on shelves. Now, judging by the look of this game and its very late release date, I suspect this was initially a Game Boy game that had had development shifted over to the Game Boy Color. I can't be sure, and there is almost no information on this game online to support my suspicion, but it makes sense due to Taito's aggressive porting of the game to any viable platform. And the Game Boy had shifted millions of units at this point and was still going very strong, thanks to Pokemon. Magazines from this period completely overlook this title, which suggests that CyberFront didn't have enough faith in the title to pay for a review in Famitsu. I couldn't even find any advertising. With Dengo Pro launching a day before, any advertising was used to promote that. But I'll come back to the look of the game in a bit, but first, let's have a look at the game and you'll see what I'm on about. Firing up the game, we are greeted with a static screen of the CyberFront logo before a recreation of the Taito logo being put in place with engines.
Densha de go!
It is essentially law now to have the name of the game announced upon arriving at the main menu. It would be really off-putting without it. Now, this screen feels off. This is a Game Boy Color, capable of displaying 56 different colours on screen at once. And here we have about 9. And that image in the middle, made of 4 colours. Can anyone think of another system that was limited to 4 colours at once? This is a pretty big clue that this was meant to be a DMG Game Boy game. The first thing a player sees is a washed out and very brown image of the train featured on the title screen of the original Densha to Go. It does not bode well. But we press on. We have 3 choices at the main menu: Start, Option and Stamp. Start will take us to the route selection screen, but before that, let's investigate the options and this mysterious stamp feature. The options menu offers up game settings, a sound test, a password function that has nothing to do with the game itself, a high score table, and an initialize option that will wipe all of your progress. Game options include a choice of control method, 1 or 2 handle style, a difficulty selector, a choice of speedometer and distance meter, and that's your lot. The Stamp Rally is the Game Boy Color's Densha to Go unique selling point. Each time you successfully stop at a station, you are rewarded with a stamp, as in a rubber stamp pressed onto a fictional stamp book. Stamp rallies are a legitimate thing in Japan, with all sorts of supermarkets, department stores, train stations and places of interest having little stamp stations where you can load up an intricate rubber stamp with red ink and slam it into your journal or stamp book. It's actually really fun. Places like zoos and museums have whole trails, and if you get all the stamps, you can sometimes get a small prize. In Dengo GBC, the stamps have 4 levels, 1 for a shoddy station stop to a 4 for stopping well. In this game, time does not seem to be a priority. You can coast into a station as early or as late as you like. As long as you stop within a metre either side of the stopping point, you'll grab a level 4 stamp. It's great! Well, it's great in that it's a reward for only doing one aspect of the job competently. The top tier stamps are another 4 colour representation of a train photo. This is 100% an original Game Boy game ported at the last minute. Has to be. Wait until you see the game running. But back to the stamps. Level 4, a scanned image. Level 3 reveals a well done message, the name of the station and the route. Level 2 nets you a slightly sarcastic "you did it" message and the station name and route. Level 1 commiserates with a message of "still a way to go" and the same details as the previous levels. Get all the stamps at each station and you unlock the stamp for the route. An unimpressive message of "section complete" and the track name. Yippee! But getting all the stations to level 4 across the 4 routes will unlock something a bit unique, but I'll come back to that later. Back to the main menu, we start the game proper. The stage select has a good assortment of colours and the same 4 tracks as the arcade game: Sanin Mainline, Keihin Tohoku Line, Tokaido Mainline and Yamanote Line. Sanin is the beginner's route and all others are advanced routes. The only significant difference being there are far fewer stops on the Sanin line. I like the little trains hopping in the corners, each one with its livery matching the route. After choosing a line, rather than getting an in-engine scene of the train in motion, we get another scanned image and a brief description. This one reads, Kiha 58 series, a star train on non-electrified sections. Equipped with 2 diesel engines, it produces a powerful engine sound and is in use all over the country. We then get the updating departing train information board. Top row reads departing train information. Below is the train, a Kiha 58 series, and it's a local / non-express route, and the bottom line is the start and end stations, Kameoka to Kyoto. As with all games, we get to see a representation of our route, the Sanin line terminating at Kyoto. And now we're in the game. The HUD is clear and functional. Top left is the speedo, usually on the bottom left, waiting times in the middle, and target time and real time are up in the top right. Because we have the two handle control scheme, the master controller is on the left and the brake lever is on the right, otherwise it looks like this. The bottom field contains a visual representation of the handle positions, the distance to the stopping point, and a window used to convey speed limits, inclines, declines, crossings, and when to sound the horn. There's a pause menu with the option to quit, resume, or return to the starting station. The gameplay field in the middle has 4 colours for the track and trackside decoration, with a solid colour for the sky. All tracks have the same turquoise sky. No idea why. There are 32,000 colours available on the Game Boy Color, and they went with a sky colour that suggests we're running trains on Uranus. There is speech at every departure too. It's pretty impressive, I suppose. We turn off the brake and we accelerate. And this is where things get interesting. Much like the WonderSwan games, the track runs independently of the trackside detail. Now, is it me, or do the tracks look more like an escalator going down than a set of flat rails? It looks like the playfield has been split into 3, the turquoise sky, a predominantly monochromatic background, and a green foreground. Pixels of darker green, black, white, and occasionally turquoise pepper the ground to give the illusion of movement. The trackside is fairly well detailed, but the limits of using 4 colours at a time is detrimental. There are some graphically impressive games on the Game Boy Color, so I cannot believe that the colour palette is down to hardware limitations. I struggle with this. On the one hand, this is a colour representation, which should put it above the WonderSwan, but it just ends up looking worse. The 8 shades of black allow for a decent amount of detail, particularly in Densha to Go 2 on the WonderSwan, but this just looks bad. This is a game that could run on the original DMG Game Boy. In fact, Pocket Densha is a Densha to Go clone that does run on the original Game Boy. Well, I say runs, it's more like playing an LCD game emulated on a Game Boy. Nevertheless, we have a moving train barreling along the countryside of western Japan. But then we approach our station, and it all falls apart. Somehow, Densha to Go on the Game Boy is even worse at relaying key information to the player. Information like how far away the stop point is, how fast you're going, the absolute bloody essentials. There's a small gauge in the information field, but this too is largely useless. What it comes down to then is developing a formula. Work out the distance to the target and compare that to the stopping distance of full brake at 60 km an hour, and then finessing the last few meters by eye. Pulling into a station means your eyes are locked to the bottom third of the screen, flicking between the distance gauge and the visual representation. Had the speedo been at the bottom, we could have cast our eyes on that occasionally, but we can't risk taking our eyes off the gauges. I'm sure the station detail looks absolutely wonderful, but I cannot risk looking at it, and there's no stopping marker anyway. And the graphics update a lot slower when crawling along at 5 km an hour anyway. So, much like the WonderSwan games, stopping largely boils down to adjusting the speed at which a number counts down to 0. Again, time does not seem to matter except for the final ranking screen. You can be early, late, whatever and still get a level 4 stamp and bonus time. We get stamps, we move on until the final stretch of track. Then we get the next route, and then we get more stamps. It's only really the first route that is visually distinct from the others. The Keihin, Tohoku, Tokaido and Yamanote all look very familiar with tall buildings or no buildings or housing. And that's it really. No bonus game, no train photos, no 3D models, no extra information of any kind. Just 4 tracks in 5 colours. And the stamps. There are bonuses for sounding the horn when going over railroad crossings, or some of them at least, but you won't really need the extra time. There are some digitized images shown when you leave the main menu running, but these are fairly incomprehensible. I think they are the same as those featured in the console port of Dengo, but the resolution is so low I cannot really say. But, I hear you cry, the stamps! What happens when you get all the stamps? Well, let me tell you, you get another stamp. One that says, "Congratulations, stamp rally complete," and your score. Good job, I guess. This is also where the password comes into play, but again does nothing in-game. The password, in my case Gedsnaedo, appears after your congratulations screen, and it's used to enter a raffle. Including in the box with the game is what looks like a registration card, but is actually your raffle entry card. On the front is the address for Gamefront, and it's in Shinagawa, a station on the Yamanote and Keihin Tohoku lines that regularly features in the series. There's a field at the bottom where you enter your password from successfully completing the rally, but to make sure there are no shenanigans, you have to attach a coupon found inside the manual. Sacrilege! What sort of lunatic would cut up their manual? The explanation for this contest as written in the manual reads, "Route Stamp Rally Campaign. Collect all the highest level stamps from all the lines and all the stations. When you enter the registration form, you'll be entered into a lottery to win a wonderful prize. Please attach the token at the bottom right of this page to the questionnaire postcard or an official postcard. Fill in your password, address, name, phone number, age and occupation, and send it to the address below. Expiration date, February 2000. By using the glorious Wayback Machine, I was able to determine just what this wonderful prize was. First prize was one of 20 pairs of Densha to Go wooden shoes. No photos, sadly. And the second prize was a prepaid ticket of some sort, probably a novelty train ticket emblazoned with Densha to Go imagery and the CyberFront logo. Again, there are no photos. Ah well, at least we know now. I'll keep an eye out for these, but I imagine they will be incredibly rare if CyberFront ever even gave them away. As of now, the password field in the options menu only yields a repeat of the password screen you get when you first complete the game. So that's about it. What more can I say? There are departure melodies on the Yamanote line. There's a nifty feature where tapping right on the D-pad resets the throttle and brakes. You can't change brake position while the departure melody or speech samples are playing, for reasons. It's one of the easier Dengo games. It's incredibly formulaic. For example, you can finish the Yamanote line on your first go. So accelerate to 80 to 85 kilometers an hour. Brake at around the 300 meter mark to 75. Brake at around the 260 to 270 mark to about 15 to 20 kilometers an hour. And then just adjust the brakes until you arrive. Really easy. The other high-level trains are similar and can adopt a comparable system. The Sanin line needs a bit more time to come to a stop, but once you get that, you can apply it to all the station stops. Where can this go on the Dengo tier list? Could this be our first E rank? Is it really worse than the WonderSwan version? I guess it is. 4 tracks, easy, repetitive gameplay, 4 colours at once, 0 bonus features, and coming out 2 years after the other versions. At least the WonderSwan Dengo had the dancing salarymen and digitised music. The credit sequence for this game is a spotlight shining on moving tracks. When I was playing this game, I said to myself, this feels like a game made by 5 people. And I was absolutely correct. It was probably given to the B team to crank out in time for Christmas. So, do we give this an E? I don't like it. While it's not good, and hiding the lackluster game behind a stamp rally campaign is a bit disingenuous, it's still a Dengo game, and therefore pretty damn amazing. Must try harder, see me after class, E rank. Agree, disagree, Let me know in the comments. Thank you all for watching. Next time, we'll be stopping off at Sega's greatest console, the Sega Dreamcast. For now though, I'll see you at the next station.